Hello, atheists. We are talking about Easter today, and religious holidays, and being as we are godless parents here, how we deal with those religious holidays being all around us with our children. But first, I wanted to just mention that if you go to the description down below, you're going to find a link to our podcast page, which has subscription buttons to our podcast's audio only version, which is available on iTunes, Google, all those fun podcast places. And down there, you're also going to find a link to the Conference on Religious Trauma, which of course is something that my lovely co-host she founded, and she is busting her ass at, and she's doing an amazing job, and there's some amazing speakers who are going to be there. So definitely go check that out. This is a conference you do not want to miss. And basically the whole goal of this conference is to educate the mental health profession on how to deal with religious trauma, how to treat it properly, and also to provide a place for people who are suffering from religious trauma to kind of connect with others and know that they're not alone and learn coping mechanisms and stuff like that. Right,
Yeah,
Jana?
we want to promote hope and healing for people who are recovering from religious trauma, and that whatever background you come from. I mean, it might be one of the big three: Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, or any number of other religions or sects or cults.
Yep. So I would definitely go check that out. The link is down below in the description, or in that banner right there, the pink banner. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention to you is that I also have an organization that helps to rescue atheists who are in danger in other parts of the world. As you know, in 12 countries, atheists can be punished by death, and so there's a lot of atheists out there who are hiding who they are, who are in immediate danger of losing their lives, and we are trying to help. And you can help us help those people by becoming a member. Just go to internationalatheist.org/membership, and you get some cool stickers and pins and all kinds of stuff. So go to that link down below and become a member. I'm a member, Janice is a member, and we're helping atheists all over the world. But with all of that out of the way, Janice, how are you doing?
Well, I've been a little bit surprised at how this weekend, which to me formerly was like a high holy weekend, it was the most sacred holiday in my life, being Easter, because to me it did absolutely represent the death and resurrection of Jesus. And I believe that 100%. I believe that actually took place. I no longer believe that. And it was very hard stepping away from that belief. My entire life was built around that belief. And so now I'm, a number of years later on the other side of it. And still, I can sometimes feel triggered by it. And I find it's a lot of people, you heard of NIMBY, not in my backyard. Well, I find a lot of people kind of have a similar response when I talk about religious trauma, which their response is, well, that's not my religion. My religion is not traumatizing. And so then I have to decide how deep I want to engage with that person. Depends on my time and what the format is and all that sort of thing. But that kind of response can be very tiring because, you're dealing with someone who's still entrenched in their religious beliefs. So it's been a tiring weekend in that way.
Yeah, that sounds tiring. How did you, growing up, how did you celebrate Easter? What happened in your family?
Well, we did. There were 4 kids in my family, and so we generally each got one, like a hollow egg with our name written on it. That was a chocolate egg. But then really Sunday was to be all about church, all about Jesus' death and resurrection. And so I learned early in childhood that because I was so depraved and wicked, that an innocent man had to be tortured to death uh, on my behalf, and he was tortured to death by a vengeful God whom I now had to worship, was forced to worship. So there are a lot of overwhelming and difficult and macabre details in that story that can really impact children and impact their self-worth. There's a lot of fear in there. It's now I see it as quite a gory celebration, and I would never subject children to it. I think it's abusive to indoctrinate children in childhood to believe that they are worthless, awful sinners who need salvation.
I agree. I'm in total agreement of that. I remember, like, when I was young, being in a church of any there was a Christmas concert I was in, and I was, like, all dressed up, and I had, like, my little pipe cleaner halo,
Oh,
and I didn't understand any of it, but it was just part of our school. We were doing this Christmas concert, and we happened to be performing it at a church. And I remember the kid next to me, he peed his pants. And when, like,
poor dear.
yeah, when I realized that he had peed his pants, like, he seemed to be afraid of this giant crucifix on the wall with Jesus and the horny, or the horny
I'm a Freudian slip.
Freudian slip.
You heard it
the
here first.
the crown of thorns. I almost said thorn of crowns. I can't talk today. But and it's like, and it was like a little bit bloody, and it was obviously very gory, a very gory thing. It was like 8 foot tall right next to him, and he seemed afraid of it. And I remember feeling really bad for him, but at the same time I was like, I didn't want to look at it either. I just remember churches were always very gory to me. I didn't understand why there was just dead guys everywhere. Like,
And
this is very
that
weird.
tends to be more in Catholic and potentially Orthodox religions and traditions. In Protestant ones, they never depict Christ on the cross. They always depict the cross as being empty because he conquered death and he's no longer on the cross. But I mean, if you've ever watched The Passion of the Christ or any other movie about Jesus, there's glorification of the gore. Maybe we call it glorification. I don't know, but it's really it's too much for children, and it's unnecessary, particularly because we don't need a savior. We are
Yeah.
capable of saving ourselves. We are
Yeah.
capable of making wise choices, making different choices. And this is a topic that definitely comes up a lot where people are saying, well, what does it matter? What does it hurt if people just, believe in a God and, believe in an afterlife? The issue I have is when believing in some kind of deity, if we're believing that that deity will rescue us in some way, then we are not motivated to make change. We remain stuck in systems of oppression rather than
Mhm.
actually actively participating and trying to find a way out. No God is going to save us. Science and humanity are going to save us. We have to do the work.
Mhm.
And that flies in the face of a lot of religious thinking. And the same idea about an afterlife. If people are so thinking that, oh, well, my heavenly reward comes after, because I certainly believe that too, and that would somehow help me to bear the difficulties of my current situation. But then you're only living for the future. And then you're also willing to stay in sometimes very dangerous and upsetting situations that you don't need to stay in. But if you believe that God is chastising you or doing whatever he wants you to become stronger through that, then you feel like you have to stay there and just kind of grit your teeth and depend on God to get through. And
Mhm.
that's not how it works. If you want change, you have to work for change.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was always taught growing up, that you get out of life what you put into it. And
Mhm.
I definitely value the fact that I'm an atheist for that reason, especially because it enables me to just really hang on to this moment right now and value this moment right now, as opposed to, you know, waiting to be happy for the afterlife. Like, no,
Mhm,
I'm working on my happiness now.
mhm,
When we were growing up, we celebrated Easter, and we obviously, we all know at this point that I was never religious. Um, but we celebrated Easter, and it was never about Jesus. It was never a religious thing in our house. I don't know when I understood that it was a religious holiday. Um, for us, it was, Saturday night we would go to bed, and I was always afraid of the Easter bunny. And I remember there was one Easter that my aunt from the island was staying with us and my cousin, and my parents had gone out the night before to some dinner party, and so my aunt was staying with us, and she put us to bed or whatever, and I was in my dad built me this bunk bed, and I was in my bunk bed, and this shadow appeared on the wall of these two big bunny ears. At least that's what I thought it was. And I was terrified. I was like, but then
Did
we
you
would
ever
wake
figure
up.
out what it was?
No, I think it was probably just my imagination playing games with me, but I was terrified. I was convinced it was the Easter bunny, and I have like this picture of like the Donnie Darko style
Yeah.
bunny, just evil and coming to get
Yeah.
you. But
Mhm,
I
mhm,
and then we would wake up in the morning, and we would, my parents would always set out some chocolates and stuff like that, like hide them around, and we would find them,
mhm,
and that was Easter for us. And we would
mhm,
then have a big family dinner, like with our extended families, my grandma, my cousins, and all of that. We would go to somebody's house and we'd have a big dinner, a ham or a turkey or something like that.
mhm,
And we'd all play together. And not once was Jesus ever mentioned, or
mhm.
nobody went to church. I think some of my cousins went to church, but I never had to go. So,
I think it's super important for people to realize that pretty much all religion stems from mythology, but also that all religious holidays have their roots in paganism. There is a pagan origin of some sort, and it's up to us to research that and educate ourselves about that and to teach our children about that. And you can say, well, in the Christian church or the Christian tradition, here's what they celebrate on that day, but here's the actual origin of the day, and why it was celebrated and how it was celebrated. So of course the Christian church has usurped those days and tried to make them their own, but it's important for us as parents to be able to give our kids those kinds of answers. Make sure you have at least one book in your house about traditions and holidays from around the world that you can go over with your kids and talk about those things.
yeah, I totally agree. And getting involved in some of those other more fun traditions without obviously getting them involved in the religious side of stuff. But like, for instance, we used to live in Surrey, and they had so many different cultural celebrations there. Like Vasaki and I forget the names of the other ones, but they were just such huge celebrations. And like every kid in the neighborhood was going and stuff like that. And you could like walk around Surrey and get free Indian food, just the most amazing Indian food you've ever had in your life. So we would get sometimes do stuff like that, just kind of poke around at celebrations like that. But I think that teaching kids about the different celebrations all around the world is really, really, really important for sure.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah, because anytime we are learning something, it's to our benefit. And certainly, one thing we talk about a lot in our podcast is critical thinking and teaching our children those skills needed to think critically, they are going to be presented with religious ideas and philosophies at some point. You may have been able to shield them when they're very young and you had total control over their environment. But once they're in school and rubbing shoulders with other kids from other homes, these concepts are going to come up, and kids might be curious about them. So please educate yourself so that you're able to give reasonable answers to them.
Yeah. I think that another thing that I've written about this a few times is that with teaching critical thinking, there's a lot of atheists out there who choose not to, have the whole Santa or Easter Bunny traditions in their lives because they feel like, it's being dishonest with your kids. I am not in that group. I think that when kids figure out that Santa is not real or that the Easter Bunny is not real, I feel like that is a huge and impactful lesson in critical thought.
Mm,
They walk away from that understanding that not everything is the way that everybody tells them it is. And like the way that we handled it with our son was that um like we never pushed the whole idea of Santa on him. We
right.
let him believe.
Mhm.
And then the moment he came to us and asked,
Right.
you know, "Are you sure this is true?" We
Yeah.
were honest with him,
Like,
right?
we don't
So
even have a chimney, Mama. How's he getting in
yeah,
here? You
yeah.
let them back in. Yeah. Yeah. Not that we have a
Yeah,
problem. No, we don't.
I remember when I discovered it was at Easter that it all crumbled down around me. It was my mom is very frugal. she, and she bought she used the same Easter basket 2 years in a row. And she was
Oh,
out in the backyard tanning. I remember this so vividly. She was in the backyard tanning, and I thought this was my perfect opportunity to go and steal some of my Easter candy without my parents looking. And so I climbed up on the counter, and like the baskets were up on top of the fridge. So I climbed up on the counter and I went and I looked at the baskets, and I'm standing on the counter just like munching on chocolate, and I'm staring at my Easter basket, and I'm like, "Wait a minute. Isn't that the same basket I got last year?" And it all just
mhm.
clicked in my head, and so I went outside, chocolate on my face, and I said to my mom, I'm like, "Mom, is the Easter bunny you?" And she's like, "Yes, honey." And I'm like, "And the tooth fairy?" "Yes, honey." "It's Santa?" "Yes, honey."
Oh, how old were you, do you think?
I think I was 6 or 7, but I would have to ask my mom. I don't know if she would even remember, but I think I was fairly young. But I remember I was sad, but at the same time, I was super appreciative of the fact that she didn't even try to lie to me in that instance. She just
Mhm.
gave it straight to me. She was very honest, and I knew from that point forward that I could go to my mom with anything and she would be honest with me. Because that was at the time I'm like, wow, that was not an easy admission, mom, like
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, that's very sweet. I like that. I like the way that she handled that, and I like your remembrance of it as something that was significant for putting you on the road to critical thinking.
Yeah, I think that there's some parents who try to fight their kids realizing that it's not true, and I think that that's the wrong way to go about it. I mean, you got to do what's right for your family, so, but just from my perspective, I think that being honest, that's your opportunity to teach openness and honesty and also to reward their critical thinking, which is just gonna cement the process in their head.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, we, even though, we were quite religious when my kids, when we were raising our kids, um, I did always try to add something in there, like we knew or we believed that Easter was really about the resurrection. We believed that Christmas really was about celebrating the entrance of Christ into the world. But I still told my kids what I said was there's a fun part of this holiday. And then there's the real part, which, that's where I was mistaken. But so I didn't necessarily deprive them of some childhood things. Like I would let them, once we did get TV, I would let them watch the Rudolph, special or that sort of thing. Or I would hide some little chocolate eggs around the house. But I wouldn't say it was from a bunny, but I'd just say, hey, guess what? It's an egg hunt. Go crazy. Have fun. So I did try to be balanced in that way, but I definitely went very overboard on making sure that they knew the real reason, the religious reason. And now I see that the religious reasons are made up. They're just part of mythology. And there's nothing wrong with mythology. As long as there have been humans, we've made things up to try and figure out stuff that we didn't know, or try and explain things that we didn't know. But as soon as we start insisting that is not mythology, that it is truth, that those are real events that actually happened, that is when we run into lots of trouble. And that's also when all sorts of judgment starts seeping in, because other people don't believe. Not everybody believes. And that's when the fear factor comes in. If you don't believe, you're going to go to hell, you're going to have eternal damnation and punishment, you're going to be tortured forever, like Jesus was on the cross. There will be no relief. I mean, imagine telling that to a child who has no larger frame of reference. And because you're the caregiver, you're the one that they trust, when we implant these ideas into their heads and tell them that it's true, there are many psychological booby traps that get put around that idea to keep them from questioning as they get older, because that truth came from a person that they trusted, and often came with other threats that were very real. Like, if you disobey me, I'm going to beat you or do whatever. You have to obey me. So there's a lot of twisting and things that go into our brains. And it's sad.
I definitely think that if I had grown up and been taught to fear hell, that I would be an extremely different person today, and that I would have been terrified. Like I that would have traumatized me, absolutely traumatized me, because I was like, I already was afraid of like everything, which is I was afraid of my grandpa, and that it wasn't because he was a mean guy. It was just, he had a very strong voice, and like he just was a like kind of a mythical man that it just is weird, the dynamic. But yeah, I would have it would have terrified me to be afraid of hell, I think.
We need to really start normalizing atheism, and at the very least agnosticism in society, and stop winking at religious stories that people dress up as truth. We really need to be encouraging people to look for evidence and to provide the evidence for their fantastical claims, because it's when people start believing in the supernatural that the door becomes open on all sorts of fronts for them. And that's why, we in Nigeria, unfortunately, and other African nations, people still believe in witchcraft, and so they are torturing and killing anybody that they decide is a witch. And of course, it usually turns out it's a woman or a marginalized person in society, or maybe they have a piece of property that someone who's more important than them really wants that property. So the easiest way to get them out of the picture is to call them a witch. And if people don't have a grasp and understanding, or they're not taught about science and about evidence, they can believe that stuff. Or we see it with very fundamentalist Christian groups where parents will absolutely reject any medical intervention for their child. And I take this very seriously. I had grandparents who were Christian Scientists, and my grandmother went blind because she was a diabetic and refused to be taking her medicine that she needed. And another relative then lost a leg for a similar reason. So I really have a hard time with people just accepting supernatural claims. We do need to rail against that and demand that people investigate things.
Yeah, the way I've kind of put it before is that you like once you accept one thing on faith, you have erased your standard of evidence, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
if you accept something without the evidence to support it, then you've just gotten rid of all standard of evidence, and so that opens the door for you to believe anything without evidence. And something that I get from religious people often when I say that is that no, I have lots of evidence. And so I naturally ask them, okay, so you don't have faith then? Like, which is
Mhm.
it? Do you either know that this is real or do you have faith that it's real? Because if it's a fact and it can be demonstrated, then you don't need faith to believe it, right? Like you just know.
Here's a clue that could help you determine if you're dealing with someone who is in fact a fundamentalist and they remain fully entrenched in their religious beliefs. If they use this phrase, I know that I know that I know. That is like such a Christian phrase to use. I know that I know that I know that Jesus was killed and rose from the grave. Let me tell you, dead people do not come back to life. I know that
No.
sounds very basic, but that is true. Once you're dead, if you're really dead, then you're dead.
Yeah.
But that is deeply offensive to people who are quite filled with faith.
It's it's something else that I never really understood about Christianity is like he wasn't like what it was 3 days. He never died. Like 3 you don't die for 3 days. Like he sacrificed a weekend is, the way that we like to
He
say it out
sacrificed
there
his
in
weekend for you. Yeah,
yeah. Like I don't understand like dead people if he died for our sins, he should be dead, right? Like it
yeah.
just
How
that's
much of a sacrifice was it really? Well, and there's in the Bible, of course, there's talk about Lazarus also, who was another person who was supposedly dead and brought back to life. But we know that there are countless other ancient religions that also have a savior story, a martyrdom story, and a resurrection story. This Christianity is just one of many, one in a line of many. And just as the others have been relegated to, myth or superstition or whatever, Christianity one day will be as well. And I know that's going to get me a lot of hate, but it's the
the
truth.
yeah, one of the best books I've ever read in my life and accompanied with just the most epic interview was Joseph Campbell's Hero
Oh,
of a Thousand Faces.
yeah.
Is just
Hmm.
he is such a magical storyteller and or
Yeah.
was and then if you watch his interview with Bill Moyer, I
Mhm.
believe it
The
was
Power
called
of
The
Myth.
Power of Myth. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
fantastic.
is what was it, like 6 hours just and it was at Skywalker Ranch, and it was just mesmerizing. The man just lulls you into this like, "Oh, tell me more stories, please." He's just amazing. I highly recommend reading at the very least, read Hero with a Thousand Faces because it's such a good book.
The Power of Myth was extremely helpful for me as I was deconstructing my Christian faith. I actually had no idea that there were other previous religions that had the idea of a virgin birth or of a resurrected savior. That hit me like a ton of bricks. It was so shocking to me because I grew up very cloistered and think that my religion was the only true religion, the only way to eternal salvation. So yeah, Joseph Campbell, very worth reading or watching.
You know what I really liked about Joseph Campbell too is that um he was not aggressive about it, and he didn't like it wasn't from an anti-theist perspective,
Mhm.
although I support you know I support that viewpoint in other people, but he was not this aggressive person who was trying to put an end to religion. He was celebrating the differences in people across the world. And it
Yes.
so like, even if you're religious, it's so easy to consume his content, and nobody is like, you don't feel like you're being attacked or broken down or anything like that. He was
No, we,
awesome.
now, what was the name of the other one? There was The Power of Myth, and the other one, A Hero. What was it?
Hero of a Thousand Faces. So
Right.
that's the book about the hero story that obviously Jesus fits, right? Like Jesus is this hero, this savior who is born of a virgin. He is sacrificed and he comes back to life. So he goes through how that story is mirrored in hundreds of other cultures throughout the world. And
Mhm.
it's mind-blowing and it's very interesting to read.
A little off topic, but when Game of Thrones was on TV, and there was like, it got to one point in the series where it was like they could put these masks on and off. I always thought about that, the hero of a thousand faces. Just
Yeah.
very
That is a
interesting.
that was a great show.
Mhm.
I loved Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it was thought provoking,
Yeah.
sometimes creepy.
Yeah, there was a lot of emotions that came out of that show. But what about Christmas? Do you celebrate Christmas, Janice?
I love Christmas time. I love it. I
Me
love the
too.
lights and the bling and the ornaments. And the family I grew up in, we always had a Christmas tree every year. And some of our ornaments were quite old, passed down from great grandparents and so forth. And we even did Christmas stockings, which would, when I was growing up, it was one of my dad's work socks, like a knitted old wool sock. And we would get an orange in there and a bottle of pop from the pop shop and maybe a package of lifesavers or something like that,
Aw.
maybe a coloring book. But it wasn't, we were never under the illusion that it came from Santa. Santa wasn't really much of a part of my growing up. Um, and yeah, I love the idea of families getting together, whatever the holiday is for. And Christmas just, to me, is a joyful time. But I have also had to unpack my attachment to the religious stories around Christmas. I still put out a creche or a nativity scene every year. I have like the individual, I think I got them from Costco or something, but we never put baby Jesus in there. My daughter is a gamer and she has all these little figurines from different games. So every year we just put a different one in there instead of Jesus. Or one time I know we had a dinosaur. I stuck a dinosaur in there, like just, because to me it makes me chuckle, and it lightens up that part of me that used to just be so heavily concerned with right and wrong and religion. So yeah, we do celebrate, and I'm having well, my daughter and her father are coming over tomorrow, but you know, instead of the usual big dinner, we're actually just going to have pizza, and we're going to sit out on the patio because, with the pandemic concerns, we don't want people in the house, even though it's just two extra people. So we'll be sitting outside, have lots of space to enjoy that. And it'll just be a lovely time of us being together and reminiscing about some things. But there won't be a lot of talk about Jesus. I can guarantee that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's similar stuff in our family. Most of these holidays for us nowadays is centered around food worship. um, I just like, especially at Christmas, I just get into the kitchen and I'll like bake and we're talking months in advance. John and I will be like sitting at the dinner table, like planning, okay, what meal are we going to have for Christmas Eve? What meal are we going to have for Christmas Day and stuff like that. Like for us, it
Oh,
is just, and we go all out. Like we'll try all kinds of new um dishes and stuff like
cool.
that for Christmas. Like one year, I believe we had ramen last year, like homemade, even the broth, everything homemade. And
Oh.
one year I know we want to have like a hot pot, an Asian hot pot.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So who is a part of your celebrations? Do you invite friends over? Or is it strictly a family event?
It's usually just family. We when I lived closer to my friends, we would have friends over all the time. We used to celebrate Christmas Eve every year with like it would just be like a drop-in center, you friends coming in, and but they're all scattered now. So, and we also moved away from Richmond too. But we now it's usually just family, but man, it's been so crappy with this pandemic because my like a month before the pandemic happened, my aunt and uncle moved to Summerland, and like I hadn't spent a lot of time with them in a long time, but I grew up with these people. Like we're talking like second parents for me, right?
Oh,
And they finally moved here. We were so excited. I believe it was last year we did have Easter with them or something, some kind of celebration with them, and then we
mhm.
went into lockdown right after. And so we have not been able to invite them for anything, and they live far away from their kids and grandkids and stuff like that. So I just it feels so awful to like invite my parents but not invite them. It drives me crazy. I can't wait for this pandemic to be over. But yes, to answer your question, it's family.
Mhm. Have you been using Zoom to keep in touch with other extended family members or anything like that?
Yeah, we use usually texting or WhatsApp, but we like I still see them around town outside.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but we
Yeah.
can't, I like cooking for people. I love cooking for people.
Wow. I'm so glad I'm your friend. I can't wait for the pandemic to be over. You can cook for me.
We're making a big ham tonight with scallop potatoes, homemade scallop potatoes, and it's going to be fun.
Very nice. Oh,
Yeah.
that sounds so good. Yeah, I miss being able to connect freely with family and friends, with the pandemic. Um, we have been using Zoom because I do have relatives in Scotland and then in all different parts of Canada. So I've been trying to do that once a month or once every 6 weeks, particularly for the folks that are older, like my mom and her cousin,
Mhm.
because mom's in her 80s and cousin is in her 70s, and they actually thought they would never get to see each other again. So they get quite tearful when we do the Zoom because it's just such a gift to them. They never thought they'd have the opportunity to see all of us together again. So it's worth it. And some people will be having to do that for the holidays as well because there will be a lot of empty places at the table. So use technology to your benefit.
Yeah, we're mostly missing my brother and his wife and their daughter. She's just 2 now, and
Oh, so
she's
cute.
so cute. She
Yeah.
just started swearing. I love it. My brother is a filthier mouth than me, so I mean, it was inevitable. But she is so cute, and I miss them. And I remember when we first moved back from Mexico, when we lived there, it was our first Easter alone without any family around because my parents still lived in Mexico, my brother still lived in Mexico, and it was just my son by himself looking for eggs, and I was like, there's nothing sadder than this in this moment.
Oh.
So I feel bad for them that they are, stuck in Mexico and they don't have family around and they're celebrating by themselves right now.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, it's funny to hear this from an atheist that a holiday like this matters to me, but it matters a great deal. It's never, not once ever in my life has it ever been about religion. It's always been about family, food, celebrating, just enjoying yourself and relaxing and connecting with people that matter to you. That's what it's always been about to us. So it definitely matters to me for sure.
The first several years after I left Christianity, pardon me, Easter was very hard. Easter was the hardest day for me, much harder than Christmas. Christians have a special greeting they greet one another with on Easter morning. They say, "He is risen," and then the respondent is to answer, "He is risen indeed." Whew, even saying that is hard because that was such a significant part of my life for so many years. And so embracing reality is not always easy. It's not always happy. There are stages that we have to go through in our health as we're reclaiming our mental health and our liberty and our freedom. So,
Mhm.
and to be on the outside of community can be really painful.
Yeah.
So, for anyone who's suffering with that this weekend, you have my sympathy. I know what you're going through.
So you're feeling like you feel sad because you miss the people that you shared that with.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the community, really. That's the greatest loss. And it's not just any community. I mean, a spiritual community where you're always focusing like on a bigger thing than yourselves. And
Yeah.
the the music is so powerful. Music is a huge part of most religions. And you're singing these same songs together with the other people, and the songs are given such tremendous weight and meaning. Well, now I look at the songs and I'm actually quite dismayed by the content, because a lot of the hymns are very gory, like about being washed in the blood, or being a soldier of Christ, or a warrior, or all those things that are certainly unacceptable, I think, to be teaching to children. And the whole idea of the rest of the world is against us, but we've gotta fight, to make the truth known. I do think it's unhealthy, but those were still, the tunes are very familiar to me, and the words come back without much provocation, because I was indoctrinated from birth with those
Yeah.
things. So building other communities takes work. And now my life looks more like a patchwork quilt, because I've got a community over here and a community over here, like a hiking community, say, and an atheist community. And so it looks more like a patchwork quilt than it did before, where it was like a circle in the center and then all the other concentric rings around it. That's what it looked like before, because we were all
Mhm.
basing our lives on this one common idea.
Do the people in that community accept you now, or are you
No.
estranged from a lot of them?
Hmm. Yeah. No, there's the common bond is extremely strong, but without it, things just really dissolve, or the relationships become so shallow after, because the one main thing that drew us together is no longer there.
Mhm.
And also, there is a fear, I think, with a lot of religious people, that maybe apostasy, so I'm apostate because I no longer believe anymore, that maybe apostasy is contagious.
Mhm.
If because I didn't know anyone who was as sold out for Jesus, anyone as deeply invested in the faith as I was, and vocal about it. And for me to walk away, what does that what does that mean for them? If it's possible for me to change my thoughts on it, it's possible for anybody to change their thoughts on it. So yeah, mostly things have just gone very quiet. A lot of crickets there. Initially, there were some people that were reaching out to me, or people telling me that I needed to be careful for the sake of my children's eternal souls. I was leading them down the path to perdition or damnation, or however you want to say it. And now mostly I don't hear from them. This morning I got some nasty Twitter comments, obviously from people who believe differently than I do, because I do speak out against religious indoctrination. And I think we need to stop looking the other way and winking at, like I said, at the idea of supernatural events. It's not acceptable to have people in positions of leadership, people who actually might have a say in deciding your future or my future on some level, for those people to wholeheartedly endorse the idea of supernatural, of a deity, because there's so much judgment involved in that. I have a real hard time with that. We need to hold people to account.
I totally agree, especially when it comes to children. I mean, I think that what you've gone through is the perfect example of like what you can do to your child by indoctrinating them with those ideas.
Mhm.
It's just it's wrong. And like I wish I often say on Twitter and stuff like that I can get along with religious people and that I'm not here to put religious people down or anything like that. But the fact remains that your religion is centered around this indoctrination and this it's abuse. It is absolutely 100% abuse, and this is something that I will never see eye to eye with these people about. Like, it's not sometimes it's not just okay to say, "Okay, you have this belief and I have that belief, and we'll just agree to disagree." In this
Right.
situation, if you are about raising a child in that and putting them through what you've gone through, then you are wrong, period. There's
Mhm.
no your opinion, my opinion, you know?
Mhm.
It's wrong. It's absolutely wrong to I have no problem with when they're old enough to start introducing them to different ideas, different religions, and letting them choose on their own if they want to go to church with you or if they want, when they're of an age that they can actually weigh out the pros and cons and they can
Right.
make the choice themselves.
Mhm.
But raising children with this indoctrination, I believe, is absolutely and 100% wrong. And you know what I get a lot when I say stuff like that on Twitter, I'm sure you probably get it too, is that, "Oh, but you're just indoctrinating your kids in atheism." It's like, how do you please outline the steps on how you indoctrinate somebody to have a lack of belief in something. Like how exactly do you go about doing that? Because I don't go around telling my kids there's definitively no god. Instead, I tell them I don't believe in a god because I've never seen evidence. If you want to
Yeah.
believe in a god, that's totally up to you. If there's these 10 gods, these 12 gods, these thousands of gods, let's look at them all. You can pick whichever one you want. By the time you get through all thousand, the kid's like, I don't believe in any of them.
I don't know if you're aware what's going on in Alberta. It seems that they've totally revised their public school curriculum, and so that they intend on teaching children about religion right from kindergarten. And I think that is appalling. I think that's much more appropriate at middle school age, once kids are, 12, 13, then to be exposing them to some of those ideas. But I really think particularly, say you've got a kindergarten or grade one kid and they're being taught by a Christian person or someone who is a religious person. Um, if you think they're going to be able to deliver that material without putting extra weight on the one that they believe, I think you're dreaming. This is the same reason I don't think people suffering from religious trauma and seeking help in recovery, I don't think they should be going to religious therapists. So
No,
yeah,
I
I
agree.
think the Alberta curriculum is just not a great idea.
Yeah, and you know what? What is it like? I don't understand why we need to like religion is a thing that you learn at home, right? Like it's something that is personal. My This is my opinion. I think it should be personal. I think that you should keep it to yourself and it doesn't belong in a public school any more than, what consistency your last poop was is a topic of discussion in class, right? Like these are private issues and these are private matters and you shouldn't be in schools. I think school is for fact based or evidence based learning
Hmm.
only.
Hmm.
And I don't understand that. I'm glad we're in BC, but it pisses me off that they fund religious schools in BC, especially the Bountiful one. That drives me crazy. That's almost $1 million a year that school gets and doesn't even graduate students. Like there's no grade 12 in that school.
Right, right. I did interact with someone in Ontario recently, and they told me that on their income taxes or their taxes, they get to choose whether they want their taxes to support public school or religious school. And I thought that
Oh,
was very interesting. Yeah, I
yeah.
wouldn't mind having a choice. for
Yeah.
something like that here. I thought I had never heard of that before. And that's in our, like, all within one country. That seems so weird to me that we could have
Yeah.
that many different ideas. I see Vibhuti said, what if they have religious people from each religion come teach their religion? In our middle schools, I think in British Columbia, the children, as part of their curriculum, they're taken to a mosque and a temple and a church, and to talk with the leader of those places, to get a feel for what each one is like and what each one is about. So, once kids are old enough, I think that's, maybe reasonable. Then they can see, or they've got a textbook that they can be learning about it as well. But I certainly don't think exposing elementary school children to those teachings is acceptable.
Yeah. I think that, like, we teach our kids about mythology, and I think that including it in mythology is great. As long as
Mhm.
that's the angle you're teaching it from, because that's really what it is. I think that exposing kids to the different ways that people see the world is important, but like you pointed out, if that teacher is a Christian, and they're given this unit to teach about religion, it's obviously going to be very heavily weighted for Christianity. And so I don't think that the school is a place to learn. If you want your child to learn about religion, send them to Sunday school. That's what it's there for. Take them to church. That's what it's there for. I don't agree that that's a good thing to do, but if that's what you want to do, that's where you take them. Don't take them to public school. Again, that's where evidence-based learning is supposed to happen.
And I think now in public schools, so you were reminiscing about being in elementary school, and you were doing a Christmas elementary school performance, and it happened to be in a church. I don't even think they're allowed to these days talk about Jesus in public schools when if they're doing a Christmas celebration or whatever, because we are thankfully now at least becoming more mindful of the fact that in your child's class there may be children from a Jewish heritage or from a Muslim heritage. Certainly Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't get to celebrate anything. I always felt super sorry for those kids. But so just, heavily promoting the one religious ideal, there should be no place for that in school.
I agree. And it was really cool the last, not obviously not this past Christmas, but the Christmas before, my son's school had a Christmas concert or a holiday
Yeah,
concert. And
winter festival.
yeah, and
So much better.
it was really cool. We went in and they had pairs of kids that were representing each pair was representing a different culture, and they were singing a song and like dressed in a costume from a different culture. There was like and it was like, it was so varied. Like there was stuff from Hawaii, there was stuff from um Nepal, and like it was like, it was stuff I didn't even know I was learning. And it was really cool. And like each pair would come and take the stage their song and talk a little bit about the celebrations and the traditions there, and then the next one would, and I just thought that was awesome. Like how much embrace the whole idea behind Christmas, in that we're here to share, we're here to love one another and accept one another and be together. And like I just think that that's the absolute best way to celebrate that type of a feeling, and that what the holiday season is all supposed to be about.
What a neat idea. Yeah, I love that idea. And what grade was your son in that they were doing that?
That was grade 6. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
It was so
there's
cute.
kind of there we can run into a difference between like what's a cultural tradition and what's a religious tradition. So a lot of people raised in Canada and in the United States, we celebrate Christmas, but we don't necessarily make it all about Jesus. But there are a lot of countries that are culturally Muslim. as well as religiously Muslim. And so for folks that are trying to extricate themselves, especially from Islam, when it is so utterly tied in to everything about the culture and the family, I have a great deal of compassion and concern for folks who are trying to leave Islam. It's just very, not only difficult and challenging, but physically dangerous. You can pay with your life for rejecting those religious ideas.
Yep, we have well, one of our colleagues who he's the president of the Humanist Association of Nigeria, in prison for being an atheist. And in 2014, when I first started my blog, he was detained in a psychiatric hospital because he told his dad that he was an atheist. His dad drugged him, his dad and his brothers drugged him, beat him, and took him to this psychiatric hospital. And we launched a campaign that it went viral. Like, it was in the BBC, the Guardian, the Independent, everything. And even Vice News covered it. And eventually he was released. And then in 2020, he was arrested, this time for insulting the Prophet Muhammad, which is ultimately blasphemy. And he disappeared into the prison system. He was never charged. He's never been charged. He was taken into the prison system, and he's been there ever since. And for about 6 months, nobody actually heard from him. Nobody knew if he was alive or dead or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are some of the issues that we work with at internationalatheist.org. And and these are, like, some of the cases that we deal with are brutal. We have one case who has a 2-year-old daughter. He's in an African country as well,
Mm-hmm.
and he's consistently the target of violence by these people who know that he's left the religion.
Wow.
And one day they came looking for him and he wasn't home, so they beat his 2-year-old daughter. Yeah.
Isn't that
And
wicked?
we have a place to send him,
Mm.
but it's a high cost to send him there, so we're trying to raise
Mhm.
the money right now. But
Mhm.
it's such an impossible situation for so many of these people.
Wow.
Leaving Islam is not an easy thing in a lot of places.
Yeah, I do encourage everybody to take a look at IAA and what you stand for and what you are trying to do with that group. I see we have one more question here from Vibuti. What do you think about international volunteering and specifically of Christian missionaries going to other nations and spreading Christianity, especially when those nations have a history of colonization? I'm absolutely against it. I think it's horrible. I think that all countries should absolutely shut their doors to anybody who comes in trying to preach the gospel. And of course, most missionaries don't go in overtly to do that. They do tent making. It's called tent making, where you pretend you're going in under another other auspices, like, oh, I'm going over there to teach them to speak English or read English. That's very common. And then actually, I'm going to teach them that by having them learn to read the Bible. And so then you're showing utter disregard for their own cultural heritage traditions that they have, their own belief system, as well as in some cases, of course, we know that the missionaries brought disease and pestilence and introduced them into these populations. I'm disgusted by it.
Yeah, I think that I'm absolutely 100% always against any kind of religious missionaries anywhere in the world. And I've had arguments. I've had so many arguments. I had an argument with a couple of Mormon 19-year-olds who
Yeah.
thought they could out argue me, but
Mhm.
um they always argue that no, our missionaries are doing good things. This is what they're doing. They're feeding these people, they're housing these people, they're clothing these people. But there's always a catch. There's always a catch. There's always, like, they have to come, they're invited to church, and it could just be an invitation, but it's a very strong invitation, and it's a repeated invitation, and you feel the pressure to go. And like, these people are being drawn into the religion. There is no other way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a selfless thing. They're not just going over there to be selfless now. And that's not to say that there are individuals who feel as though what they are doing is good and they truly believe in what they are doing is good. That's not to say that. Like, I know that there are people who believe that they're doing things and changing people's lives for the better, but you cannot, if you're going to give something, there can't be a catch. That's not charity.
There's always a catch. There's always a catch when it comes to religions that are supposedly charities or doing charitable work. There's always a catch. I know people love the Salvation Army and feel like it's safe to give to the Salvation Army. Salvation Army traditionally has not been any friend of LGBTQ. And also, it's the Salvation Army. They're a Christian-based organization. They think that you are a guilty heathen sinner and you need the blood of Jesus Christ. That's what they believe. So be careful where you give your money and where you give your time. There are tons of humanist organizations that you can give to. And then also, even instead of going on a missions trip, I think it's Bamboo Travel Company. They will set you up to go on a trip, and you're actually helping to whatever. You're washing the elephants, or you're feeding the whatever animals, or you're working in an orphanage that has nothing to do with Christianity. And so you're truly there just to serve on a humanitarian level. You're not there trying to entice people into believing your faith.
One of the biggest, absolutely 100% secular organizations out there that is doing amazing work is Doctors Beyond Borders, and I am a donor. I'm a supporter. I love that organization. They are.
Is it beyond or without? Doctors Without Borders or Doctors Beyond Borders?
Doctors Without Borders. That's right.
Okay.
And I definitely suggest supporting them. And with the Salvation Army, you're absolutely correct about that. Growing up, I had a friend whose father was he suffered from a great deal of mental health issues, and he would often take off and like go live on the streets. And so the Salvation Army would take them into their shelters, which sounds wonderful and neat, but they would not make him, but it was very strongly encouraged for him to attend services, to listen to sermons, to do this and do that. And then they would bring him in to volunteer as well and try to draw other people into the faith. And yeah, I never put money into those red kettles at Christmas.
Christian-based, religious-based recovery programs are horrendous. They are really encouraging people to swap one addiction for another. You're going to quit drinking only through Jesus, and then you must be utterly devoted to Jesus from then on. And then, of course, that comes with the whole teaching that you're a worthless worm on your own. You can't do anything. I always instead endorse SMART recovery, SMART, SMART recovery programs that do not encourage or insist on belief in outside sources of strength, or deity type things. Yeah, I would never recommend those for people. I know that the group component and the community component of AA, that's something that can be incredibly helpful to people who are in recovery. And you know what? There are secular AA groups. There are atheist AA groups. So you can look into some of those things. But yeah, stay away from religious recovery is my advice.
Religious people have always said to me, whenever I've said that it's replacing one addiction with another, they're always like, so what? What if they are addicted to religion after that? At least it's not drugs. It's not as bad as drugs. Well, yeah, it can be. It can be absolutely life destroying, as you you are walking evidence that it can absolutely 100% crush you and like make everything about life more difficult. And so yeah, it is just as bad as a drug. I'm sorry, it is.
And yeah, religion definitely does tend to breed judgment and divisiveness. So you're either in the group or you're out of the group. There's no wishy-washy middle ground. And so then if you become a hardcore believer, and then what happens when you have a child that's gay or trans or otherwise involved in things that the church condemns, then that division comes to your family, and it is painful.
Yeah, I agree. Dara asked, what was the name of that
Oh,
bamboo?
Google, I think it's bamboo travel, but you could just Google humanitarian travel opportunities or humanitarian travel companies. Like it's kind of the idea of traveling with a purpose.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like fun.
Mm-hmm.
When we lived in Mexico, we volunteered for an organization that took in all the strays, because in Mexico there's so many stray dogs and cats. And in the town that we were in, they ran this clinic where a bunch of for a week, every vets would come from Canada and the US and the UK, and they would just round up all the street animals, and they would spay and neuter them all and then re-release them. And within a couple of years of me living there, the population of stray animals, of feral animals in Playa del Carmen had like just almost completely disappeared. It was amazing. Yeah, I love
Wow.
that. It's awesome.
Wow, what a great project to spend time and money on. I love
Oh my
that.
gosh, you get to hang out with puppies. It's
Yeah,
so fun.
what could be better than that?
Yeah.
I want to remind folks that if you go to divorcingreligion.com, and that's divorcing and then with a hyphen, religion.com, that is my website. And I run the Divorcing Religion Workshop, which is an online group workshop that takes place over 6 weeks. But right now, I'm currently offering simply the workbook for the Divorcing Religion Workshop. And obviously it's at a greatly reduced price than if you're participating in the whole group work over 6 weeks. But so I encourage you to go there and take a look and drop me a line. Send me an email if you want to talk about some of these things that we've been discussing. And come to the conference on religious trauma. It's going to be
Yeah.
held online May 11th to 16th. We've got some fantastic speakers. Dan Barker and Daryl Ray, Marlene Winnell, Mandisa Thomas, Jeremiah Kamara, Yasmin Mohammed, Nate Phelps, you name it, we've got them. It's going to be a fantastic event. I'd love to see you there.
So Vibhuti asked another great question, but I think it's one that we could probably turn into a whole episode. So maybe we want to save that question for another episode. Yeah, it was, how do religious people reconcile their belief that being two-spirit LGBTQ plus is a choice that I don't support it then when their own kid turns out to be a member. So basically, how do they reconcile the fact that it's a choice when their own child turns out to be that way?
Mm-hmm.
It's an
Yeah, that
interesting
definitely
question.
could be enough for another show. And certainly,
Mhm.
in my experience, personally, and also professionally as a therapist, sexuality is a huge, huge issue for people who are both in religion and people who have left religion. And there's a great deal of questioning for many of us when we leave, and experimenting that comes along too, because we think, well, maybe I'm not really straight. I was raised to think that I had to be straight, but I have these other feelings or desires, and you're questioning everything about your whole identity. It's really interesting and fascinating topic. We definitely should talk about that.
Yeah, I just finished writing a chapter about in my book. My book's been a long time coming, but I just finished writing the chapter about sexuality and parenting and all of that, and I think it's
Mm,
turned out to be probably one of the best chapters in the book. So
nice. I can't wait
talking
to
about
read
more.
it. Autograph copy.
Yeah. But we should wrap this up because I have a ham to cook. Yes, we're having it tonight because my husband has to work on Monday. So we're having the big party tonight. And by big party, I mean very tiny party.
Yes.
Um,
We're having 2 people over.
yeah. Mom and Dad.
Well, enjoy. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds great.
I hope that you enjoy your weekend too, and that you find lots of fun things to do and have some chocolate.
Oh, yes, there will be chocolate. That's for sure.
Okay.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today.
Thank you,
Take care.
everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.